welcome to Model Kit Stuff and part 3 of our Airfix new tool Cromwell build. We are at step 12 and we're going to press ahead with building the upper areas and see how this so far beautiful kit goes together. Right, so the next part to be removed is E15, which is this here. Now I just want to show you a little trick I do where when you're removing parts that are fairly thin, and this one's not too bad to be honest, but on things like this, any part that's so thin that possibly it could snap, there's not too many parts on this build that are like that, but I'll show you the trick anyway. What I tend to do is near to one of these support struts, I cut the sprue. Let me show you. And the reason why I do that is as you're cutting through these parts here, you put in pressure, and the pressure distorts the part. Now if you cut the sprue, some of that pressure goes up through the sprue, and it just helps ensure that you don't snap the part. See, there's a lot less movement in that now. If I go and do this middle one here, if I do it from underneath so you can see, as you cut through it, the part distorts. So on very thin parts that can actually cause the part to snap. I mean, jack staffs on ships, for example, are a prime candidate for snapping. Like I say, there's nothing overly thin on this kit. But yeah, a little trick, I find that does help. Right, so we have that part off and we want E37 and E36. Where are we? Right, at the bottom here. So as we look at that from the rear, 36 is the right hand one as you look at it from the back. So I'm sure it'll be handed and it'll be easy to see, but what we'll do as we take them off is we'll put them next to each other the right way around. It just helps me remember what I'm supposed to be doing. Okay, let me clean these parts up and we'll get back to you for fit. Right then, parts are cleaned up, so let's get them on. So the first one is this rear frame that goes over the exhaust system here. So it's got the hinges on, which is nice. I'm guessing this hinged up for cleaning or whatever. For some reason they needed access to this bit. Fit there is lovely. So let's just bob that in. Just a touch at the back there. All good, and then we're going to swing around because we're then putting the front fenders in now. There is a couple of ejector pin marks which you can just see in there, quite a deep one. So I will put some Mr. Surfacer in it. I'm not going to do it now. We'll do it when the tracks are off. I think it would be easier to do now, but and what I'm trying to do with this video initially is show you how well this model builds up, or not, as the case may be. But so far so good. But there is a side plate that goes on here, so you're hardly going to see it. So you could probably get away with not filling it if you wanted to, but my OCD is not going to allow me to ignore it. So yeah, so this goes on like so. Let's just check the fit there. Fits beautiful actually. So we'll just run some glue in there. Check the positioning and put some glue on that back joint. Okay, can't fault the fit of that. Just make sure I've got it all buttered up correctly. Yeah, there are no gaps or anything with this. It's all good. Right, step 13. This is where things get a little bit more interesting. Step 13 has you put on the last bit of photo etch, which is this grille. The grille itself is quite nice looking. It's been done with a crosshatch pattern, so it looks like the wire that threads weaves in and out, up and over and back down again. So it looks very authentic and will look great under paint. However, the instructions don't show you fit it now. They just show you a photograph and it says question mark, so it's clearly an option. You can put it on or you can leave it off. I'm going to put it on because it just adds a little bit of life to it. But when you look closely at the instructions, what they've used there is not the photo etch part that they're supplied. Firstly, it's a different shape. It doesn't have these corners cut in. So from this, I can't tell you whether that cut off corners end faces outwards or faces inwards. I'm going to guess it faces outwards, and that's how I will do it. Also, it doesn't have the edge there. It has the wire sticking out. So it's probably worth looking at some reference photographs if you're trying to build this as accurately as possible. I'm not, I'm just throwing it together because you might want to just trim the edges off so that you've got the wire sticking out. I mean, it's quite possible that they just tack welded on, stitch welded on some wire mesh that was cut out of a bigger sheet. That's very feasible, but I don't know. So it's worth having a look at that if you're interested in making sure you're getting the detail as correct as possible. But yeah, that could do with a little bit of extra thought maybe in the instructions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on, but I'm not going to put it on now. The reason being is when you look inside there is some really nice detail, some rivet detail and bits and pieces, and I want to paint that and weather that before I put the mesh on. So we will leave the mesh off, which subsequently means that part E6 here will also get left off from step 14, but we'll look at that and we'll dry fit that in a minute anyway. Right, so next parts, we're on step 13 and we've got the rear of the fenders to look at there. So let's get them nicked off. I always think they have quite an odd looking shape, the rear of the Cromwell fenders. They look quite chunky and heavy. And I'm guessing it was just to give them some strength so that they didn't get damaged. I don't really know. I'm sure someone will tell me. I'm finding I'm getting more views from people on the Cromwell than I have on many of my other videos. And while we're talking about comments on this, I do appreciate all the comments. I do actually have a degree in military history, but that doesn't make me an expert in well, anything really. it's such a massive topic, you couldn't possibly know everything on everything. But what I will say is, I'm no expert on the Cromwell tank, and I'm being told, I've been told more than once, that the hedge cutter that's going to sit on the front here, which will be on my model, was never on a Cromwell tank and was never on a British tank. So I spent 30 seconds with Google and found pictures of the hedge cutters on the Cromwell tank, which was in British service. So I'm sure there's more to it than that, but for me, there's pictures of it on a Cromwell tank. That'll do for me. That's enough for me to justify putting it on. But I was going to put it on anyway because it looks cool. And my guess is that Airfix Stroke Academy, if they're the real people behind this, have done their research. And I'm not saying kit manufacturers don't ever make mistakes, because boy, they certainly do. I remember the King Tiger with Porsche turret that Tammy brought out. What a bag of chisels that was. They couldn't have mixed up more production runs in one single model if they tried. But anyway, we're getting off the point here. I'm modelling my Cromwell tank with the hedge cutter on because I like the look of it, and because I've seen period photographs which show a Cromwell tank with it on, so I know that it existed. If you've got a different view to that and think it's wrong, then I recommend you don't put it on yours, and then that'll keep you guys happy. But some people have sent me some really detailed views on configuration and things like that. Brilliant. Please do keep sharing those comments, because obviously other people read them as well, and it's helpful for other people. You're helping everybody out, not just me. I'm building this straight from the box, just to give people a view of whether this kit is any good or not. Nothing more than that. But yeah, it is helpful for others, so please keep commenting. They are greatly appreciated. But I would also say, if you don't know what you're talking about, don't guess it, don't make it up. Talk about it if you know about it. There's lots of people out there that only build tank models, and they know what they're talking about. So you guys go for it. Okay, let's have a look at the fit of these. Now, again, there's a lot of ejector pin marks. There's 4 ejector pin marks in there, and I think that they're going to be more visible than the front ones because you've got no side fender. I don't think. I might be wrong. Okay. So that sticks out of the side a little bit. I don't know whether that's right or not. It might be. It might be something running the full length of that. Well. Oh yeah, there is a little side fender at the back as well. I do apologise. Just looking ahead to the next step, and we'll put them on. I still think they're more visible because they're right up to this. They're right up to the edge here, so they will be visible. So again, a bit of Mr. Surfacer in there, I think, but the fit is really nice. So let's get that in while we're at it. I always have my glue on the left hand side of me, so what it was doing on the right hand side of me then, I don't know. Right, let's dab that in. Yeah, just checking I've got it lined up right before I put more glue on it and commit myself. Now, if you remember, we had a little issue with the ends of these two mud guards wanting to splay out a little bit, so you must ensure that you get that resolved to get these to sit properly. Okay, that's the first one on. Do it slightly differently this time. We'll put a little bit of glue on the location tab, just hold it in place while we line it up. So there's a location tab at the top which seems to work well because it's nice and wide, and then there's a little thin strip on this part here that this sits against, which just makes sure that it's at the right angle and hasn't fallen in towards the wheels too far. Sorry, I went off camera then. Until you start making videos yourself, you don't appreciate how difficult it is to keep everything in view and think and talk and glue at the same time. Okay, that's the rear fenders on. Right, let's have a look next then. We're going to skip the photo etch, but I will just place it on. No, that's interesting, I hadn't noticed that. Well, I'm glad I just did that. Yeah, okay. So we have a lip on this part here. So there's a little lip that goes on the back edge there and slightly up, maybe a third of the way on each side. I'm gonna guess that is for that exhaust. No, it's not. The exhaust cover goes the other way. I'm not sure what that's for, but you're not going to be able to put your photo etch on with it there. So it looks like you're going to have to remove that. Let's have a look. So if you look at the depth of the photo etch, I don't want to take this off the fret because I'm going to risk damaging it as I'm not sticking it on right now. Yeah, you need to remove that to get that to stick on. That's very odd. Very odd. Let's have a look at that again when we fit the exhaust cover. So let's have a look at that now. If you remember when we did the unboxing, I say remember if you watched the unboxing video, this is the part that noticeably had quite a lot of sink. So it has these ribs here which I'm sure are oversized. I'm sure when the aftermarket stuff comes out for this, there'll be some nice thin etch ones to go in there. Fairly sure that's oversized. So they're not giving this as an option, this part, so it's not like if you're building the markings of A you put it on and the markings of B you leave it off. So it's on both of them. But what you can see here, I don't know if we can get that in the light there, there's quite a lot of sink. So wherever you've got one of those, you've got a sink mark. So it needs a fair amount of filler and sanding. But I just want to have a look at the fit of this. Let's take the tabs off the back. Because that little location rib on the other part is bothering me. That's interesting as well. There's a little step. There's a little step in the part there. I'm not quite sure what that's for. So that goes on the back there like that. So the length is good. There's some funny flecks. I keep thinking I've got hairs or something on it, but there's little flecks in the plastic. Yeah, so dimensionally, the fit of that is perfect. It's really odd. Right, I need to put a bit of glue on the back corner of that. Right, let's see if I can get this on camera. So the part won't fit, this part won't fit on here because of this little locating ring. Now I'm just wondering, did I fit that upside down, and that should be facing down? I think possibly. Let me just see if we can take that up and we'll have another look. I'll come back. Okay, I've had a look at this now and I know what the problem is, and I know how to sort it, so let me take you through it. I put it on my kit originally upside down, and I'll show you. If you look at the picture here, you can just about make out that there is a recess, and therefore the lip should point upwards. So when you put it on, you should have a little recess that I'm guessing the plan is the photo etch fits in. And when you look at the photograph of the photo etch, there's no recess, and the wire mesh, the etch part, sits on top. It's not sat in any recess, there's no recess to be seen, but we've already commented that the photo etch looks different there. Okay, so that's how the instructions are showing it. When you look at the part itself, I'll show you the part now. So that's the part facing up the way it should do. And we've got what? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 ejector pin marks there, which are going to be, you can clean them up, but what a pain in the butt that is. And you've got the added problem that the photo etch doesn't fit. So the photo etch is too wide. If I line it up with the bottom of that rib, bottom of this rib here, so it sits inside the recess, as you'd imagine it should do, then the top edge of the photo etch is sitting on top of that ridge. So you've got two options as I see it. You either trim the photo etch down, which means you're going to lose the fastening detail on the edge, so that's not going to work, or you do what I originally did by accident and you flip it over, you glue it on without the recess, with the recess facing down, and then once this is glued in place, sand that little location lug off so that you can stick your photo etch straight on top. So that's what I'm going to do. So yeah, I did fit the part wrong, but ironically, by doing it wrong, I did it the right way to solve the problem that comes with the kit. Alright. Make sure I glue this corner down properly this time. So, a little bit of deja vu. We're fitting that part again, but we know what we're doing this time. Makes all the difference. Okay, so we'll let that dry and we will sand that off. So once we've painted the inside of that, when we do the initial paint, we can then attach the photo etch on the top of that plate without losing any of the detail. The fit of this is going to be slightly problematic as well, because there is a ridge, there is a little lip, so this back line here, if you can see that, I don't know if you can see that at all, is a 1/4 mm higher than the rest of the part. So that strip there is slightly higher, slightly raised above these bits. So when it sits on this part here, you're actually side onwards seeing a small gap. So I'm going to sand that flush. Yeah, that'll solve it. It will thin that down as well, so we need to be careful, but okay. So what I will do off camera is I will chuck a load of filler on this and sand it so that the part's ready for fitting, but dimensionally no issues at all good. So yeah, it'll look nice. You will be able to see the grille detail ever so slightly. You will not be able to look down and see that detail. Yeah, got to think about it. It might be worth putting the grille on now, actually. Might be worth putting the grille on now, because once this is on you can't see down into there. Right, yeah, let's do that. So I'm going to let that dry before I sand that off, so we'll come back to this. But in the meantime we can carry on with the other parts of 14, which are these bits here. The gun mantle, the front glacis plate there. And we've got that door to put on. So let's do that. Right then, side skirts. I've cleaned up the two for this side. I'll do the other two off camera because it'd be much of a muchness. So you have, what they've done is they've put a radius on there to give it an impression of being thinner, which is nice. I think it probably needs a little bit more, so I'm going to thin mine out a little bit more, particularly on that forward edge, which will be quite visible. There is a couple of injector pin marks, but they're raised, so they'll sand out nicely anyway, but you're not going to see those. What we want to do, I've just missed a nub there, what we want to do is just see what the fit's like at this stage. So there's a little raised location ridge which fits into place on that forward, and then it runs along the top of there. Now what's a really nice touch is that the location points for the fenders are now being hidden under these side skirts, and that's really nice, because even though they've been cleaned up, they're visible but they disappear totally. So that really helps the finish of the kit. That's nicely thought through. So that fits perfectly. What I'm going to do though is I'm just going to thin the forward edge of that a little bit more, because it is quite thick looking even though they've had a bash at it. That looks better. I'm not so bothered about the facing down bit, but the forward facing edge you want to have thinned down a little bit. So that just holds into place quite nicely. Let's plop a bit of glue on it while we've got it there. Just make sure that's up with the top edge. Okay, that's the forward fender on, and that all looks good. Right, the rear fender, it's the same process. I'm not going to thin this one. They've already put a taper in, which is good enough for the bottom. There's a couple of small location pins that you might want to fill. You're not going to see them, so I'm not going to bother. No point putting work in where you don't need to. And then that fits with this edge, goes over the top of that. Like so. And again, the fit of that seems to be good. So we'll just make sure it's properly buttered up against the end there. and we'll put some glue on that. I'm not 100% sure that looks right. It's wanting to kick out a little bit. There we go. That's better. Oh, that's interesting. So to get this to sit flat, let me make sure I've got the top on that before we have an accident. To get this to sit flat down as it should do against there, we're pushing this part forward a little bit, which is creating a very small gap. Now I don't know whether it's correct and there was a gap there, or whether that's an issue with the part. You see there's a, if we look on the one for the other side, there's a ridge there, and that ridge is pushing it back, so the solution might be just to trim that ridge back a little bit so that it fits. I think what I'm going to do is, before that dries, we'll take that off and have a look at that. So I think I'm going to trim that back a little bit so that we lose that gap. So I'll come back and show you that in a minute. I also want to show you this while we've got the camera running. This is the front plate. It sits in the front really nicely. I have already test fitted it, so it sort of clips into place. It's a bit of a squeeze, but it gets in. But look how smooth that is. I think that would have been a cast plate. I don't think that would have been a rolled plate. There's no texture on that, so I think that should have a bit of a pitted texture on it, which they could have done. It's only an observation, but as far as the actual part goes, fits great. Right, so I've now fitted that rear skirt, and that fits much better, as you can see, and the solution was simply to take that edge back a little bit. So all I've done is I've sawed about 1 millimetre back, which is probably a bit excessive, but that's what I did. And then with a chisel, I've carefully gone in, making sure you're not pushing towards yourself. It is difficult because you naturally want to hold the part, and I've just chiselled in and made it level with this lower edge here, and that it now fits beautifully. Yeah, so I don't know whether that's an issue with how I fitted the rear mudguard, or whether it's an issue with the kit, but it was a simple solution. But I'm flagging it in case it's an issue with the kit rather than an issue with the builder. So, well, that's that sorted. Right, so we're pushing forward on this build, and we're now focused on the front area. So we have put in the toe-in rings. Tip here is that you want to attach the ring to its mounting before you glue it into place, because it'd be very difficult to get that toe-in clip in, because it butts right up to the edge of this here. I've put the first two, I guess they're guards for the lights that sit in those little holes there. I put the first two in. The fit's really good, but it's important that you get the angle of this correct, otherwise that's going to foul on it and you're not going to get the part in properly. You'll notice that this is lying down, and it wasn't originally. I have managed to knock it off in the process of attaching these guardrails. That wouldn't have happened if they'd given us a single part that we could bend. Just noting.
that this is a really silly solution. I know I might have mentioned that already. So I'm going to have to glue that back in, which gets a little bit more difficult. Now that's glued in place, but anyway. But the fit of those parts is good as long as you just think about attaching the ring first. Loader's hatch. It says on the instructions, attach the hinge to this and then glue it in place. I wouldn't recommend that because it's difficult to make sure you've got it all perfectly aligned. The best solution is to glue the hatch in place and then put the hinge on top, and it all fitted beautifully that way. And I put that in before I put the front glacis plate on, and that just clipped in, and then there was a little bit of glue put in the seam. It holds in place lovely. This hatch here, double hatch, gives you an option in the instructions for open or closed, and on the inside it has little pads that you glue in, one on each. There's different sizes to fit the different size doors. Obviously we've got no interior content here, so we're doing them closed. I don't know whether there was lift handles from the outside on these or not, but there isn't any. Which may well be correct, I guess. But the fit of that was really good. So next thing we've got to fit is the forward lights, and I'll just show you the fit is really good. Oh gosh, right, I'll do this one. That's easier to hold. There we go. So that just drops in place, lovely. I'm putting the guardrails in first and then slotting that in, but I don't think it really makes difference either way. It might even be easier to put the headlamps in first. Now this other lamp here has some sink just there under the little hood thing. So we need to just put a bit of Mr. Surfacer or some filler in there. Otherwise, that's gone together really well. And that takes us to the end of step 15. So all of these parts are step 15. You can see here the pads and the option to have it open or closed, but I don't think we'd be doing that. Okay, so I'm going to put some filler into that, sand it off and glue all that into place, and then we'll have a look at step 16, which has the fire extinguishers, some tools and the vision point lids. I'm guessing that's some form of vent. So yeah, we'll do that next, and we've got a small light there as well. Okay. Okay, sprue G is looking like it's nearly spent. So we have, what have we got? 2, 4, 7 parts here, which make up step 16. Something I forgot to show you previously, but I'll show you now, is that I have also filled and sanded the sink that we had in this part here that goes on there. So we need to deal with the back plate of that in a moment, so that we can get the etch on. So we'll put that to one side for the minute. What I have noticed is on the fire extinguishers we have a raised ejector pin mark that we need to take out, and there's seam to clear up, so we need to do that. It's obviously the same on both of them. Otherwise, no real issues. There is ejector pin marks on the inside of the vision lids, but I think once you've scraped that out with a knife, that won't be seen, so I'm not too concerned about that. So the best way to deal with raised ejection pin marks on small parts like that is to just deal with them with a knife. So I'm simply going to use, this is actually a relatively fresh blade. I do tend to sharpen my knives rather than use fresh blades, but I put a fresh blade in for doing the cutting the wood decks out for war spite, so I've left it in. There we go, that's dealt with. Take off the screw knob. I think people underuse knives, if I'm honest. Okay, so we'll just use a flat, there's a connection point there we need to get rid of on the back, and at the same time we're just squaring up the plastic there at the back, and we'll just make sure that's nice and round on the back of the tank, fire extinguisher tank there. And then we need to just remove the seam. Which is a quick job. So the seams on the top actually quite heavy. If you've not got a seam scraper, then a knife will do the job. But there is also a little bit of seam between the fire extinguisher and the bracket that it sits on. You will struggle to get in there without one of these. You will be able to do it with a thin knife, with a little bit of careful scraping with the point, but this just makes it a lot quicker. Okay, and there's a seam underneath, and I'm going to take that off so that the part sits nice and flat. Now I think one of the, I think it was Jeff actually, was saying that he'd looked for these from the Ultimate website and they were out of stock. You can, when we get to shows again, you can usually buy these things at shows, and IPMS do their own version, so if you're a member of the IPMS you can get a seam scraper. I think their seam scrapers are a bit bulky personally, but there you go. So that's all cleaned up. I'm going to clean up the rest of it off camera, and then I'll show you what that looks like when we come to fit. Okay, so we've cleaned up all these parts. So let's get them on the tank. First thing is one of these extinguishers. Now they go in two different directions. They have little location points for your pins to go into. They're not holes, they're just little indentations. And the indentations are closer together than the location pins. That's interesting. Ah, no, that's me, not them. So there's three location indentations, and I was trying to get it in the wrong two. There you go. So that's the first one on. The other one on this side has it in a different direction this side because of some of the tooling that's going to go on. fits much easier when you put it in the right place. Okay, and we've got 3 of these viewports, so I'm going to test this first. Yeah, it is it's not possible to get it in the wrong orientation, so that's good. Just make sure that's flat and flush. Yeah. Now the lights, let me show you on the instructions. These little, I'm going to say indicator lights for want of a better understanding, they just sit on the top of there. So what it's saying is this bracket here should go behind this bracket here, or that's how I'm seeing it, and that little ridge there on the top sits on top, so that sits behind. Therefore it must butt up next to the edge of that, because you've not got much bracket left. So that's a little bit tricky. So I'm going to put some glue on the front face of that light, just so it's a bit sticky. There we go. And we'll just butt it in. And I'm sure the detail-minded people would be saying, right, we need to put a little cable coming from that or something. I won't be doing that because we're just looking at how this builds up, nothing more. Okay. Well, the rest is the same as we've already done, so I will get on with doing that, and then I'll come back to you when we're ready to put the tools on. Okay, so the next step, we've just done this, the next step is to put these tools on, and on reflection I want to paint those separately before I glue them on, so I want to airbrush this before we put those on, so I'm going to leave those, they'll go on around about the same time as we do the link and length track. So that's step 16 done for now. So that brings us on to step 17. Now I had a comment from one of the viewers that said the bins might not be the right configuration. Well, I don't know enough about it to know what would be right, and what we're doing here is demonstrating the build of the kit as it's instructed, so you can get a view of what's in the box, how well it goes together. If you feel that this is wrong, then build it differently, but I'm going to build it as per the instructions. So we've got these bins here to put in, this cover that goes on there, and then we've got the front machine gun, and I guess you could leave that viewing port open, but as we've got no interior, I'm not going to do that. But yeah, I'll take all these parts up and clean them off, and then we'll have a look at how they go together. Okay, so we're ready to fit the parts from step 17. Couple of things to just go through first. The vision port actually has some nice interior detail, so that you can have the whole thing open, or you can have just the smaller vision port open, because there's detail on the back of that. There is a small amount of sink on there, which obviously once you put some matte paint on, it'll be quite visible, but you could work that out and fit these on as open. I'm not going to. I'm guessing there would have been a glass block in that piece, which obviously there isn't, and if we have the whole thing open, we'll see that there's nothing inside, so I will model that closed. There was no issues with that. On the machine gun, it's rifled out. You may want to drill that out a little bit further, possibly. I might have a go at that before we paint it, but I'm not going to do it right now. A bit of seam clean up. There was an injection pin mark underneath, but it was so faint that I decided just to sand it out rather than fill it. And there was a bit of flash on the gun muzzle flare that needed to be removed. Other than that, this was all just standard cleanup. So we'll start with the viewports. Now, actually the instructions don't suggest that you could model it open, but you clearly can. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them together and just put a little bit of glue in the hinge area for now. And then we'll place it on the model. If we put a little bit of glue there, that'll go both around the back edge and up into this secondary vision port, so that should lock everything nicely down into place. So that's the vision port done. Now I'm just interested to see whether we can mount the machine gun. Again, it doesn't say this in the instructions, but see if we can mount the machine gun and leave it movable. I think we might be able to, so let's just have a look at the fit of that. Yeah, you can glue that into place and the gun can traverse. But I think what we will do is glue it in just to be sure. So again, the instructions don't say not glue it in, they just say stick it in. So that's what we will do. Just be mindful when you put the ring in that there's two flat edges, and the larger one is for the bottom. And that's in and straight. Well, it was straight, it'll be straight again in a minute. There we go. It's not happy, that. Let me have a look and I'll come back. Right, we have a significant fit issue with this little ring that goes around the gun. On the back, I'll just show you here. Here you can see there is a little indentation around the ball. Now the machine gun is put in perfectly straight, and there's a little pin there. You can see that sits into that little lug hole there. So we know the gun is sat properly and square. So the little indentation around the gun ball, there was a raised little bit of plastic, 1/4 milli maybe, and I thought maybe that was causing the issue, that was a tight fit or something, so I've sanded that off, but that hasn't solved the problem. It's now nearly fitting, and the issue is the amount of material in here. So basically, to cut to the chase, the part doesn't fit because it's never going to fit, and there's either too much material on the ball or too much material on this. So you could sand the ball a bit smaller, or as I've already glued the ball in, we can take some material out of this, which I'm just doing with this rat tail file right now. So we're just taking a bit of material out and test fitting, and what I'm trying to do is go all the way around and keep it as even as possible so it's nice and square and we don't get it off center. But yeah, you're over 1/2 millimeter shy of this thing fitting properly. So I'll just get rid of all the burrs. We don't want anything else causing us an issue. So we'll just test fit that again. I'm hoping now we've done enough. That is not quite there, but you can see the principle. We need to take some material out so that this fits over the ball, so I'll keep doing that today. That's now in place, but yeah, the fit of that part here is utterly rubbish, so just to be mindful of that. Okay, let's crack on. Next part is E31, which sits over there. Now this has a bit of a slant on it, so we need to make sure we orientate it properly. So the thicker end of the wedge, if you like, faces backwards. Okay, pleased to say that fits nicely. So we'll put a little bit of contact on that one, I think. Okay, that's on. And then we've got these bins. So if we do this side first, again we've got indentations for these to fit in. Now that goes in nicely. Let's glue that one in place. And then we have this little bracket that goes down the side of it here. So I'm not quite sure what that is, but goes next to it and sits all the way back. The bins are really nice, by the way. There's some very tiny rivet detail on it, which is going to really look good under paint. And the representation of the fastenings that open it, the tie down clips and the hinges is nice, and again will look really nice under paint. So that's the first bin down. Okay. Now, so it looks like these are the holes that we drilled in part 2 of the build. So it looks like there'll be an option at some point to not have a bin there, which is why they've had you drill the holes out. So I'm going to put that one in first. Makes sense to me. It's a lovely positive fit on these parts, which has been the story for most of this build, to be honest. The machine gun, front glacis machine gun, stands out as the exception that proves the rule. Right, that's not sitting down, probably because my holes aren't big enough, so let's just open them up a little bit. That's nice and flat, fits flush now. Okay, so that completes step 17. I do want to sand that off though, so let's do that while we're at it. I've got something a bit coarser. Yeah. I'll just take that down first with a coarse emery board. Just cuts through that a bit more quickly, and then work out which is the coarse side of that. When you're sanding a large piece like that, it's important to try and keep your pressure equal so that you're not sanding it into a wedge shape. Much easier to say it than do it, of course. Get that dust out of the way. Right, and now we'll go to the finer side. Clean out of there. Okay. Just going to go around with a knife and just scrape away that sort of burr that we've created from the sanding process. Make sure everything's nice and sharp. Right, okay. So that should fit flat now, which it didn't quite do before. And we should have a nice flat edge there for the photo etch. So I think we're going to call that this video done. In step 18 we start the construction of the turret, so this seems like a logical place to pause. Just to recap, we have gone from, where did we get up to? We have started at 12, didn't we? So we have done the mud fenders, mud guards, we've done that back part there, which we ended up sticking on the wrong way round because it was made more sense to us. We've filled the sink in that, we've put the front glacis plate in and completed step 14. In step 15 we have broken off the etch and had to re-glue it back on. We've put the towing hooks in, the forward lights and hatches, and these bars here. We had no issues with that, a little bit of sinking there, but all good. We've completed this part here with the vision ports. I have neglected to put E2 on, I've just noticed, so I'll go back and do that in a minute. And we've put the fire extinguishers on. We're leaving the tools off until final paint. We have just completed step 17 and dealt with the major fit issue. That's the worst fit issue we've had so far. So step 18 in the next video starts with building up the gun mantle and then building into the turret. So that's where we're up to. So far so good. Thanks for joining, thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll see you all again soon. Stay safe, everyone.